In today's episode of the PsyCurio podcast, we're diving into a topic that hits close to home for many. Why do so many smart kids grow up feeling lost, disconnected, and stuck? They were once ahead of the curve, praised for their intelligence, and told they had limitless potential. But somewhere along the way, that promise turned into pressure. That praise became a prison. Now, many of those same kids, the ones who once stood out, are struggling as adults. They lack motivation, feel socially behind, and find it difficult to start or follow through with things. Worst of all, they can't quite explain why. On the surface, everything seems fine. They're still sharp, still capable, but inside, there's a constant feeling of isolation, like life is happening to everyone else, and they're just watching it pass by. So, why does this happen? It turns out there's a reason. Many smart kids unknowingly build their entire identity around being the smart one. And when that happens, the very thing that made them feel special as children becomes the thing that traps them as adults. But there's good news. This isn't a dead end. It's simply a survival strategy that stopped working. And once you understand how you got here, you can begin to find a way out. The identity trap. When we're young, our sense of self is simple. Kids latch onto a few defining traits, whether it's loving Pokemon, playing a certain sport, or eating nothing but chicken nuggets. Identity starts out one-dimensional, and that's normal. But for some kids, one of the strongest labels they receive is, "You're smart." That label sticks. It gets reinforced by teachers, parents, and peers. Over time, it becomes a core part of how they see themselves. And for a while, it feels great. Being smart gets you praise, attention, and a kind of easy mode in school. You don't have to study as hard, you grasp concepts quickly, and you stand out among your peers. But here's the hidden cost. When you're constantly praised for being smart, people aren't praising your hard work. They're praising your effortless success. You got an A without trying? Amazing. Solved the problem instantly? Incredible. Understood something on the first try? Genius. And over time, this reinforces a dangerous idea. If I'm smart, things should always be easy for me. That belief quietly sabotages everything as you grow older. Because the moment something isn't easy, when you struggle, fail, or don't understand something right away, it doesn't feel like a normal challenge. It feels like a threat to your identity. Avoiding failure equals avoiding growth. Instead of embracing challenges, you start avoiding them. You don't raise your hand unless you're sure of the answer. You don't try new hobbies unless you know you'll be good at them. You avoid risks that might expose you as not so smart after all. And slowly, your life starts to shrink. You stick to what you're already good at. You avoid discomfort. You protect your smart kid image instead of exploring, experimenting, and growing. Meanwhile, everyone else is out there trying, failing, improving, but you stay locked in a shrinking comfort zone. The longer it lasts, the harder it becomes to break free. At some point, you realize you've built your whole identity around something fragile, something that now feels like a cage. The isolation effect. When you stop growing, you also stop connecting. Real friendships come from shared experiences, being on a team, struggling through challenges together, learning through trial and error. But if you opt out of these things, if you don't join clubs, avoid group projects, or shy away from activities that might expose you, you start stepping out of the flow of social life. You still crave connection, but instead of engaging with people, you start analyzing them. You rely on logic instead of emotions. You develop cognitive empathy, understanding people intellectually rather than emotionally. And while that might help in conversations, it's exhausting. Socializing turns into another skill you have to perfect rather than something natural. And to avoid failing at it, you start avoiding it altogether. That's when the loneliness deepens. The trap of overthinking. You're smart, right? So you should be able to figure this out. You try to fix your self-esteem with logic, writing out rational arguments to convince yourself you're fine. You analyze your own behavior like a puzzle to be solved. But none of it helps, because intelligence isn't a tool for fixing emotional pain. There's no intellectual answer to the question, am I enough? That question can only be answered emotionally. And for many smart kids, emotional growth is the one thing that got left behind. When loneliness becomes unbearable, the ego steps in with one final defense: I'm just different from other people. You convince yourself you don't relate to others because they're not as deep, not as smart. You build a wall between yourself and the world, not because you truly believe you're superior, but because it hurts less than admitting you feel left out. Breaking free. So, how do you fix this? The first step, non negotiable, is letting go of the smart kid identity. Not because intelligence is bad, but because tying your self worth to it is toxic. When your value is based on effortless success, you'll do anything to avoid struggle. You'll sabotage progress just to protect the illusion of being exceptional. So instead of asking, what makes me look smart? Start asking, what helps me grow? Stop protecting your pride and start embracing discomfort. Try things, be bad at them. Show up not to win, but to participate. At first, it feels awkward, like stepping backward. But in reality, it's the first step toward becoming whole. The old identity told you your value came from being special. The new one reminds you your value comes from being human. And being human means you're allowed to struggle. You're allowed to learn. You're allowed to feel lost and not have all the answers. But the only way forward is to take action. Not perfect action, not clever action. Just honest, messy, human steps forward. If you've spent your whole life trying to be the smartest person in the room, and now you don't know how to be anything else, this is where you begin. Let go of the need to impress. Start trying to be real. Because you don't need to be the smartest person in the room to belong. You just need to be someone who shows up, imperfect, unsure, and willing to try. And if you can do that, something incredible happens. You start to feel something you haven't in a long time. Connection. Not because you earned it, not because you deserved it, but because you finally allowed yourself to step down from the pedestal and join the world where the rest of us live. And it turns out that world isn't so bad. In fact, it's the only place where you can truly be seen. And more importantly, it's the only place where you can finally feel at home.